You are the words and the music. You are the song that I sing. You are the melody. You are the harmony. Praise to your name I will bring. You are the Lord of lords. You are the mighty God. You are the King of all kings. So now I give back to you the song that you gave to me. You are the song.
Received a text from Eddie, and it said that they are going to wait at least to 2 o'clock. They're going to try to reevaluate Nealon at 2 o'clock to see if that's what it is. He's not, evidently the doctor's not completely sold on that's what needs to be done just yet. So we'll wait and we'll update you as soon as we hear something, or if you hear something, if you don't mind updating us as well. That way we can have the right news and be able to relay that on to the congregation. You know, when we thinking about Eddie and the teens, and Eddie and I were talking the other day, and someone overheard us talking, and they found out that Eddie and I went to college together. We had a lot of college classes together, and somebody asked me, they said, "How is that so, since Eddie is so much older than you?" I thought, well, you know, I was a late bloomer. No, really, Eddie is younger than me, and not that much, but I was a late bloomer when it came to going to college and going to school, because I was one of those students that really, I didn't care. That's just it. You know, I was probably, you could probably classify me as C minus. You know, so if you don't want to be like me, you need to study a lot harder. A C or C minus, and I remember going to college late. I started college right when I was supposed to. Went on to move in with some fellas that I knew from school. They were a couple years older than me, and we spent our nights playing basketball, cave exploring, doing all kinds of things, rarely studying. So ended up my first semester at UNA, I had the GPA of 1.33. And that's on a 4-point scale. Went to Heritage, went to IBC, had great grades at IBC. That was my passion, and had some good grades there. Went to work in the secular world, and they were talking layoffs, and I just wasn't really that happy in doing that. And I wanted to go back to school, and Leah worked so I could go back to school, and I was grateful for that. And went back and took a lot of classes, but I thought all the Heritage stuff would transfer over and boost my GPA. Well, it didn't. When I got back to UNA and started to try to take classes, I thought I'd boosted it up enough to be close to a 3.0 to get into the School of Education, but it was still a 1.3. So I took every class I could, PE, every gym class, weightlifting, you can tell, walk, jog, run. I took tennis at 6:30 in the morning. I took as many as I could. When I had finished all of those PE classes, I asked my advisor, is there anything else that I can take to get an E? I need a good A. And he said, well, there's human environmental sciences. And I thought, no, Libby worked there. Human environmental science, ooh, what is that? That sounds hard. He said, it's home ec. So I took home ec and was able to boost my GPA to get into the School of Education and be able to finally get my degree. So right on the screen here, I want you to think for just a moment about maybe your education, what you did in high school, not college, because it seems like if you're paying for it, you try a little harder, right? All right? But, you know, your schooling here, were you poor in school? Were you good? Or really, I could scribble that out and put the best that you could be. That's what that would be. That would be where you're really happy with your achievement and what you were able to accomplish. You worked really hard. You put forth the extra time into doing it. Or would you classify yourself as the average? I may be mistaken, but I think many of us, we wouldn't say the poor, even if we were. We would want to say the good, but I think a lot of us would say we fit right in there with the average. We fit right in there with everybody. What about your work, okay? What about where you work? Now, if poor is mean you're late every day, you don't do what you're supposed to do, and you're borderline fixing to lose your job. you got the good, where you're early, you stay late, you catch up, you're caught up on all that you're supposed to do, and you're on top of it, and everybody comes to you because you are the one that does all the hard work, and you know exactly what needs to be done, and you do it. Or do you just go into work because it's a job to get what you need to get, and you just go in and do what you're supposed to do, but when it's quitting time, it's time to go home? I think a lot of us, we wouldn't admit if we were poor, and we sure would like to be the best over here, but I think a lot of us would still want to say we really fit into that average category. When we think about average, you know, I guess typically you think that's a good thing. We think that average is something that is right in the middle. We're not the best, we're not the worst, but we fit right in there into the middle. And a lot of times we're happy with that. We're completely happy with that. But when you look back, when I look back on my schooling and my education, and a lot of you are the same way, when you look back on things of your life, you really think, you know what, I wish I had tried harder. You ever feel that way? That I wish I would have applied myself just a little bit harder, just to be better than I was. I was okay, but I should have been better. Because, why? I had so much, say it with me, potential. You know that word. You know the word potential. We use that word a lot. We use the word, oh, bless his heart, he had so much potential, but he ended up not doing what he should have done. Or I would have done this, and I think this. I think we use that word potential more along the lines like an excuse now. For instance, I could have been an Olympic swimmer. I had the potential to be an Olympic swimmer. Now, if you really know me, you know how ridiculous that sounds. But I had the potential to be an Olympic swimmer. But I never could make it because my parents couldn't afford a pool. See how that sounds? See, I would be able to do great in this class. I would make straight A's. I've got so much potential to be able to do that. But the teacher really isn't that good of a teacher. Or I could succeed a lot more. I could be great at my job, and I could be the best at my job, and I've got the potential to do this. But you know what? All these other people, they just suppress me. They don't allow me to do really what I'm capable of doing. And that word, potential, we use that so much, and we throw it around so much to the point of, you know what? It's really an excuse for us. So why not try to be better? In the text that was read, that Ron read earlier in 2 Peter chapter 1, it says to be diligent, to push with diligence, to add to your faith virtue, to your virtue knowledge, to your knowledge temperance, to your temper. And he goes on, and we call that the Christian growth chart. You know, the Christian graces. These things that we need to work on and the things that we need to get better at, and we need to continue working, giving everything we've got to get better. Because let me tell you something, church. I don't want to shock you. And I don't think I'm shocking anybody here this morning. If I am, I'm sorry, but this is the truth. This is the Word. We look in our Bibles and we find how many people are going to have salvation. There's no specific number. But what does it talk about when it talks about narrow is the way that leads to life everlasting? How many does it say are able to find it? Few. Few there are able that find that way. There are a lot of bad people in this world. But there are a whole lot more average people in this world, religiously speaking, spiritually speaking. Is that right? And if you would honestly just look at yourself and say, where do I fit up here spiritually? You might be a little bit more honest because it's church with yourself. You may not want other people to know it, but you might be honest with yourself and you say, you know what? I'm right here. That is me. I know exactly where I am spiritually, and I know where I'm not, and I'm on the wrong side of the fence here. Or you may be over here and you say, nope, you know what? I am good. I feel comfortable with my relationship with God, Everything is working out fine. I have this healthy relationship. I'm studying my Bible every day. I'm praying every day. I'm giving of my means, not just here at church, but I'm giving of my time to other people and to help other things and do all these sorts of things. And I'm doing what I'm supposed to. And you feel I feel good about this. But I don't think there's that many people here that feel this. I think this is where most of us feel. Why do we settle for average, church? Why are we okay with settling? Right, ready. Give all diligence. That means everything you've got. That means putting forth the extra effort with an eagerness in it. Meaning you're excited to do what you can. Why do we get to the point where we're happy with average? Well, that's the question I want you to think about this morning. I want to give you a biblical example of it. Go to the Old Testament. So let's look. There's a text here that we're going to spend a great deal of time in 2 Chronicles chapter 25. Second Chronicles chapter 25. When we look at the kings of Judah throughout the Old Testament, when we look at the kings, there's a lot of kings, and Amaziah was the eighth king, the eighth good king of Judah. Now that word good, we're going to use it very loosely here for right now. But the phrase that we're going to hear over and over, did what was right in the sight of God. That doesn't mean they were perfect. They were not perfect. These kings of Judah, they suffered a lot. They had a lot of problems when these kings came into play because of the idolatry, because of where they were. There were these high places, the scriptures call them. Those high places to where they would offer idol worship. They would have this worship to Baal and worship to Asheroth and worship to Molech. And a lot of the Israelites and the people from Judah were going and worshiping God at some sense, following parts of the law. But then they would go over and they would go to these idols and honor those as well. So they had their problems. Now, I'm not excusing that, but some of those texts that we read, it still says that these guys did what was right as much as within them to serve God and to do what God asked and was pleasing in the sight of God. And one of those that we find is mentioned here in this passage of 2 Chronicles chapter 25. And I think as we look at his example, and we're going to look at it, but as we look at his example, I think we're going to see how we don't need to follow his, even though he did what was right in the sight of God. Because what this king does, his name is Amaziah, this king, he falls into the average trap. Because when you look at him, as compared to the other kings, he's the last of the good kings. Now, I don't mean last in the lineage of the good kings. I mean, if you were to rank the good kings in order of the most good that they did to the least good that they did, you're going to find Amaziah at the bottom. Not evil. He wasn't an evil king. He was good in the sense of he fit right at the edge of the line between good and evil. He didn't excel at being great. He barely made being good. As we fall into this average trap, the first step we're going to see is we must be clear about our commitment so that we don't. We don't want to fall into the trap. We want to be clear about our commitment. Now let's read the text. Look with me, if you will, at 2 Chronicles chapter 25. Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoadan of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. Now, if you don't mind underlining in your Bible, you'll notice there's a comma there. There's a comma right after that when he said he did what was right in the eyes of God, but the comma says, yet not with a whole heart. That's what makes him last. Yet not with a whole heart. When you look at the kings before, good king, good king, good king, mediocre king with Amaziah. Let's see if we got it. If I put up the right slide here. Asa. This was Asa. You find Asa. You find him in 2 Chronicles chapter 14. I know the font is small. Maybe you can still see it. He did what was good and right in the sight of God. Then you got Jehoshaphat doing what was right in the sight of God. Chapter 20, verse 32. Then you got Joash. Did what was good and right in the sight of God. Chapter 24, verse 2. You got Uzziah, who's down here, did what was good and right in the sight of God. 2 Chronicles 26, 3. Then you got Jotham, did what was good and right in the sight of God. 2 Chronicles 27, verse 2. Hezekiah did what was good and right in the sight of God. 2 Chronicles 29, verse 2. Josiah did what was right and good, or good and right in the sight of God. 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verse 2. And right in the middle, we had this Amaziah here, who the font got shifted there, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not with the whole heart. For the rest of his life, he's going to have that tag. For the rest of eternity, he's got this tag where the rest of us, every time we read the scriptures and we read this story, we're going to find this tag, this asterisk, right by his name, that he did right, but he didn't do it as much as he could have. He had so much potential, but his heart was not fully dedicated to it. He had so much good that he could have done, but he never really dedicated himself to do what he could. You see, if we want to avoid the trap of being average, because if you look at our theme for the month, it says we are better. We're trying to seek to be better than average. Because we don't have an average God, church. We don't have an average God. I don't look at the sacrifice of Christ and think of what he did for me as average. So if I am going to give back to him, I don't want him to look at me and say, I didn't give you an average gift. I gave you my life. I died for you. I was crucified on a cross for you. And I expect you, when you understand that, to give me your heart, to give me everything you can, to seek to fulfill my will, even though you can never repay me, but to try your hardest. I don't want him to say, Matt, you did good, but not with your whole heart. As we look at this word here, the but or yet in the Hebrew, it means there was a leanness. A leanness. Although or merely. That means he was lean in his activities. He really just did the minimum that needed to be done. Sound familiar? If we put it in our perspective, David, I just do the minimum I need to do at church by coming to worship. That's the minimum. But a lot of us think because we're here, we're doing a service to God. And that's not true. How is your service to God? James 1 calls it a double-minded man. You know what he says about a double-minded man? He's unstable in all of his ways. That means you're half in, you're half out. Your heart is split. You're not doing what you need to do wholeheartedly. You're double-minded. Revelation calls it that lukewarmness. We can't afford to have this, church. We can't afford to settle for average. We can't afford to fall into the trap of average. We need not to use potential as an excuse, but we need to use it into our benefit. God has given us the greatest gift this world could ever have in the Word of God, so that we can learn from it, so that we can apply ourselves, so that every day we have an opportunity to live better today than we did yesterday, and better tomorrow than we did today, and better than the day after that, because we have the gift that God has given to us to seek to make ourselves better. We're flawed, we're going to fail, but the mindset of our hearts need to be set on doing as best as we possibly can. We continue to work knowing we'll never succeed in it. We've got to have this clear. We've got to have this clearness in our commitment, and we can't be wishy-washy about it. We've got to be solid in what we want to do. Jesus calls it in Matthew chapter 15, verses 8 and 9, when he's quoting one of the old prophets, when he says, "They honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me." You may be here this morning and you honored God with your lips as you sang to Him, but the heart was not wholly committed to being here. If you want to avoid that trap, you got to be clear in your commitment. If you want to avoid that trap, you got to be concerned about the right things. Let's look at Amaziah. Let's look and see what he did. Verse 3. As soon as the royal power, this is how he did not do everything that he should have done. As soon as the royal power was firmly his, he killed his servants who had struck down the king his father. He did what he was supposed to do. But he did not put to death the children, according to what was written in the law, the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, "Fathers shall not die because of their children, or children die because of their fathers, but each one shall die for his own sin." He's still doing right. He's still doing what he was supposed to do. Then Amaziah assembled the men of Judah. He set them by fathers' houses under the commanders of thousands and of hundreds for all of Judah and Benjamin. He mustered those 20 years old and upward. He found that there were 300,000 choice men fit for war, able to handle a spear and a shield. So 300,000 men of Judah. This is his people. He's the king of Judah. He's not the king of Israel. But he also hired, verse 6, 100,000 mighty men from the valor of Israel for 100 talents of silver. But a man of God came to him and said, "O king, do not let the army of Israel go with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, with all of those Ephraimites. But go, act, be strong for battle. Why should you suppose that God will cast down before you the enemy? For God has power to help or to cast down." So this man of God, here's the deal. Make sure you understand. You've got this army. They're ready to go to battle. They have 300,000 men to go to battle of their own. That's a lot. But Amaziah says, you know what, I want more than that. So I'm going to call over to the king of Israel and say, "Listen, let me purchase, let me rent from you these other soldiers. I want 100,000 soldiers that are ready for battle. That'll make me 400,000 of soldiers so I can go off and I will get my victory because we will outnumber the enemy." But the man of God comes and says, the prophet says, no. You don't need to do that. You don't need to go over to Israel and borrow soldiers from them. Because here's the deal. Israel is not doing what's right in God's eyes now. They're not following God. They're doing sinful things where they are. And you don't want to yoke yourself with those sinful people right now. You want to stay with Judah and stay with what God wants. Listen, if you do what God wants, this man of God says God's going to take care of you regardless. Don't you think He can give you the victory without these 100,000 men? Do the name David ring a bell? Goliath? Don't you know you don't have to have a big army to defeat the giants? That makes a good point, does he not? Now, the right thing of being wholly committed to God, not being average, would be this. And Amaziah said, "You know what? You're right. You're right. I was wrong. Call up the king of Israel, tell him forget about it. I don't want anything to do with it. But what about the money? Don't worry about it." But that's not what he does. Because instead of being concerned about doing what was right, Amaziah was concerned about the money. He was concerned about himself. Listen to what happens when the prophet brings this word to him. "For God has the power to help or to cast down." And Amaziah said to the man of God, "But what shall we do about the 100 talents that I have given to the army of Israel?" The man of God answered, "The Lord is able to give you much more." Let's think about this. If we don't want to fall into the average trap, we need to be sure that we're concerned about the right kinds of things. And you think 100 talents, that's not a lot. Maybe like $100. No, 100 talents, if you were to weigh that, that's a load. If you were to weigh 100 talents that he was to give to the king of Israel, that he gave to the king of Israel, today it would weigh 9,400 pounds. And when this man of God comes to Amaziah and says, "You don't need to be concerned about borrowing their soldiers, buying their soldiers, renting their soldiers. You need to be concerned about doing what's right. And Amaziah says, okay, I'll do what's right. You're right. I need to do what's right. But what about my money? Am I going to get my money back? If I don't rent them, do I get my money back? Not concerned about right, concerned about himself. You see, we can't afford. If we fall into the average trap, we're more concerned about what we get out of it. What can happen to me? What do I benefit from it? And we're looking at the king. The king is sitting there saying, what's in it for me? What's in it for me here? And a lot of times that's what the average Christian does. We come to worship and we come to be served instead of coming to serve. What can the church do for me? That's the average mindset. The dedicated, wholehearted, committed mindset says, what can I do for you? If Amaziah was wholly committed to God, he wouldn't have worried about these funds. He wouldn't have worried about this money. He would have left it where it was. But oh no, he wants to make sure. He wants to be sure he gets what's his so that he doesn't lose it. It's almost, this is really, and I started thinking about it, this is really the first example, I think, in Scripture where someone is really trying to have a financial conversation with God. We don't want to find ourselves doing something similar. If I'm going to be blessed for trusting in God, all right, well then give me back what I've already given. Most people that settle for being average in the church, when they do it to settle for themselves, not for the benefits of doing right, but for the benefits of themselves, they do things similar to shady business deals. Maybe you'll not be honest with someone when you're making a business deal with it because you might get a little more out of it. You might compromise yourself by cheating on your taxes just a little bit because, I mean, come on. We got to get what's ours, right? They make it hard on us as it is. And maybe we can trim a little bit here. We won't get too much involved in church because we don't want it to cost us too much. We're concerned with ourselves over things. We can't afford to do that, church. The last point I'm going to save here for the lesson this afternoon. But as we look at ourselves, I'll go ahead and point it out to you. The last point that we're going to make is for the afternoon devotional. If we don't want to be average, we got to accept correction when needed. And we'll look at that this afternoon. But maybe as you think of your life this morning, that's a perfect way to have the invitation, isn't it? You don't want to be average. You want to be better. You don't want to settle. You want to push yourself. You want to be, because of the sacrifice that Christ gave for you, you want to be the best that you can be. Well, you got to be clear in your commitment. And you got to make sure you're concerned about the right kinds of things. His will, His life. I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life that I now live in the flesh, Paul says, Galatians 2:20. The life that I now live in the flesh, I live by faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave Himself for me. It is not me and my wants and my desires that I'm concerned about anymore, Paul says. If I was, I wouldn't be being beaten, shipwrecked, arrested, stoned. If it was about me, I would have given up a long time ago. But it's not about me. So look at your commitment this morning. You got to settle for average. You're going to look back when you're in the nursing home. You look back at your life and you're going to say, you know what? I was a pretty good person. I had so much potential, so many opportunities before me. I sure wish I did better. Don't fall into that trap. Satan teaches us average is good enough. So, Matt, are you saying average is not good enough? I think I'll just leave that in your court. Let you think about that for a minute. Sure, I'm glad it wasn't an average sacrifice given for me. Whatever your need is, look at your life, evaluate it. The blood of Jesus is here. Come and allow Him to fix your life as we stand and as we sing the song.
Just as I am without one.
You are the words and the music. You are the song that I sing. You are the melody. You are the harmony. Praise to your name I will bring. You are the Lord of lords. You are the mighty God. You are the King of all kings. So now I give back to you the song that you gave to me. You are the song that I sing.